Hello and welcome to the audio version of my concert notes for this special program featuring Grazyna Bacewicz, Dmitri Shostakovich, and Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. This program is centered around themes of oppression and authentic flawed human responses to it. Each of the composers have lived their truths and have exhibited their authentic selves through their art. Their themes are weighty and consequential in ways that have affected me really deeply this week. Each of you here will connect with every one of these works in your own way. That and timeless thematic relevance is the power of this art form. So I like to think about this quote, art is the place where beauty and tragedy meet. We're going to start with Grazyna Bacewicz. She was born in 1909, died in 1969, and was a Polish composer and violinist of Lithuanian origin. She's one of the first Polish female composers to have achieved national and international recognition. Bacewicz showed an early interest and aptitude for music, performing her first concert at the age of 7 and composing her first piece at around 13 years old. She studied composition in Warsaw with Kazimierz Sikorski and in Paris with Nadia Boulanger. Bacewicz lived in Warsaw during World War II, where she managed to continue composing and performing, although in unadvertised secret concerts. After the war, her composition career and reputation was in danger of evaporating from public memory due to politically motivated censorship. She was somehow able to continue composing, but it was nearly impossible to have performances under the strict ideological control of the arts in this period. In 1948, Prague hosted the International Congress of Composers and Music Critics, which formulated the principles of socialist realism modeled on those already in force in the Soviet Union. The Congress was accompanied by a music festival, during which time there was a performance of Grazyna Bacewicz's Overture, which she was able to attend. And while she was there, she wrote a letter to her brother in New York saying, "Dear brother, I'm in Prague for the Contemporary Music Festival. My Overture was performed today. Great success. Tomorrow I'm playing on the radio. As I'm in a foreign country, I ask you, dearest brother, not to be silly with your letters to us, because we'll end up in prison. What's more, I ask you not to write about communists, etc., on our journey to America, etc. All your letters are censored in Poznan. They are opened allegedly because they were badly sealed. Lots of love, Grazyna." These were difficult conditions for most creative artists to produce meaningful work safely. Still, Bacewicz continued composing until the end of her life in 1969. She has 56 chamber and solo works, 12 concertos, 16 vocal works, 3 ballets, a radio opera, and 22 orchestral works, of which the Overture for Orchestra is one. The Overture for Orchestra was written in 1943 by Bacewicz at the age of 34, during the German occupation of Poland. The overture was not able to be performed until after Poland's liberation from the Nazis. It was premiered in 1945 in Krakow. The sound world of the Overture for Orchestra sits somewhere between Dmitri Shostakovich's Festive Overture and Glinka's Ruslan and Ludmila Overture. It is about 6 minutes long, and it flies by in a frenzy of loud activity and near constant forward motion, with the exception of a brief, breath-catching moment in the middle. One might wonder what Bacewicz had in mind for this music. Is it a reflection of the turbulent times, a defiant message of strength under duress, or a piece to satisfy the state-sponsored art censors? Moving now to Shostakovich's Cello Concerto. Dmitri Shostakovich, born 1906, died 1975, was a Russian composer and pianist who achieved early fame at 19 years old with his first symphony in 1926. He and his music fell under intense scrutiny by the Soviet government, however, which led to his creation of music that satisfied political watchdogs, as well as what he called his, quote, desk music, work that he kept hidden away in a drawer in case it might fall afoul of the authorities. Shostakovich remains one of the most influential composers of the mid-1900s, with 15 symphonies, multiple works for piano, an astonishing 15 string quartets, 3 operas, 3 ballets, numerous film scores, and 6 concertos, including Cello Concerto No. 1 in E-flat major. Shostakovich composed Cello Concerto No. 1 in E-flat major in 1959 when he was 53 years old. He had already survived 2 government denunciations and, unbeknownst to him, was just 1 year away from being blackmailed into joining the Communist Party. The Cello Concerto No. 1 is just the second of the 6 concertos Shostakovich composed. It is famously almost a double concerto, with French horn playing a very prominent role. This is a point of interest partly due to the super nerdy fact that his first concerto, Piano Concerto No. 1, composed in 1933, has a similar feature, but this time with solo trumpet. And here's a shameless plug coming at you, which is the Colorado Symphony is performing Piano Concerto No. 1 coming up in just 2 weeks on February 20th through 22nd. Shostakovich dedicated the concerto to famed cellist Mstislav Rostropovich, who memorized it in 4 days, premiered it in 1959, and recorded it 2 days later. Shostakovich calls for a relatively small orchestra of winds and pairs, only one French horn with no other brass instruments, timpani, celeste, and strings. This gives enough warmth and clarity without overpowering the solo cello, while also allowing for an intimate and sometimes lonely or creepy vibe as needed. The concerto is constructed in 4 movements, which are presented in 2 chunks, such that movements 2, 3, and 4 all run directly from one to the next. The first movement, Allegretto, introduces a 4-note idea that becomes an obsessive mark throughout the piece. These 4 notes, G, F flat, C flat, B flat, have the auditory property of a falling minor third, a rising perfect fifth, and a falling minor second. This is important to note for 2 reasons. First, it is right away stated multiple times beginning on different pitches while holding that same shape. And second, it is somewhat relative to and reminiscent of Shostakovich's musical signature D, SCH, D Shostakovich, Dmitri Shostakovich, or D, E flat, C, B natural, which he does quote later on. Interestingly, in his famous String Quartet No. 8, composed in 1960, just a year later, and dedicated to, quote, the victims of fascism and war, both his musical signature and a quote of this cello concerto motive appear back-to-back in the 3rd movement. Now, for you super nerds who want to check the score, it's at measures 131 and 140 of the String Quartet No. 8. And I do have a couple of examples of those score pages on my website. The second movement, Moderato, slows the pace and allows for darker and more brooding sounds to come forward. Near the end of the movement, there's a very chilling and creepy duet between the solo cello and the celesta, which is a keyboard instrument that produces bell-like sounds similar to a child's toy piano. This movement elides directly into a substantially lengthy solo cadenza, which is its own movement. This cadenza serves as a colossal monologue. It turns intimate, searing, and always building toward a return to the obsessive 4-note motive, which then brings the orchestra in for the final movement. The 4th and final movement, Allegro con moto, is a frenetic, explosive banger to finish the piece. We hear the French horn in duet again with cello, along with punctuated chords from the orchestra and shrieks from the winds at various points, before the piece finishes on 2 orchestra-wide statements of the obsessive 4-note motive. A typical performance of the concerto lasts about 28 minutes. Now we move to the 3rd and final piece of music on our program, this by Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky, who was born in 1840 and died in 1893. He was a Russian composer of the Romantic stylistic era. He was the first Russian composer whose music would make a lasting impression internationally. In addition to 6 symphonies, he wrote some of the most popular concert and theatrical music in the current long-form acoustic music repertoire, including the ballets Swan Lake and The Nutcracker, the famous 1812 Overture, which has somehow become a staple at U.S. July 4th celebrations, Piano Concerto No. 1, Violin Concerto, the Romeo and Juliet Overture Fantasy, and operas Eugene Onegin and Queen of Hearts. Despite his many popular successes, Tchaikovsky's life was punctuated by personal crises and depression. Contributing factors included the untimely deaths of his mother and later of his close friend and colleague, the collapse of his 13-year association with a commissioning patron, and being unable to be openly queer in a deeply intolerant, oppressive society. Tchaikovsky's unexpected and sudden death at the age of 53, just 9 days after the premiere of his Symphony No. 6, is surrounded in misinformation and controversy to this day. Various accounts include cholera or poisoning, and there is evidence to support a claim of a state-sentenced, quote, honor execution by suicide. This work, the Symphony No. 6, the Pathetique, is one that captures the imagination, hearts, and minds of listeners everywhere. You don't need to be experiencing oppression to find yourself in it. There is something universal in the emotional heft of Tchaikovsky's expressions, which resonates with anyone who struggles with their human flaws, whether perceived or real. The symphony is constructed in the traditional four movements or musical chapters that form an arch shape. It bucks tradition by shaping the arch differently, though. Typically, there would be an up-tempo first movement, often with a slow introduction, followed by two inner movements that form a dance and something contemplative, and then bookended by a fourth movement in a quick and or majestic tempo. Instead, Tchaikovsky seems to swap the contemplative and final movements so that this symphony is bookended with extended material from the slow first movement introduction. Many audiences applaud at the end of what sounds like the final movement, but it is actually the third movement. On the website, you'll find something that looks like a musical score for the audience, which notes when coughing and clapping occur. It's meant as a joke, but in truth, it's nearly impossible to withhold applause at the end of the third movement because it sounds so triumphant. It's clear that Tchaikovsky did this on purpose, choosing to finish the symphony with contemplative longing and darkness rather than triumph. He's serving realness and his truth. Tchaikovsky gave the symphony the title The Passionate Symphony, using a Russian word meaning passionate or emotional. This word was translated differently into French as Pathetique, which means more solemn or emotive, and into English as pathetic, then, moving even further away from its original intent. It's easy to understand how these slight but important mistranslations stuck, since the piece begins and ends with such darkness, loneliness, and longing. Now, despite the arch-shaped outer movements suggesting suffering or even death, the inner movements are lively, graceful, and powerful sounding, even with periodic injections of tension. Possibly the best example of this is the second movement. This second movement, marked Allegro con grazia, which is just quick with grace, is an apparent waltz, although it's arranged in beat groupings of 5 rather than the expected 3. This could have an effect of making the dance seem off-kilter or limping, but Tchaikovsky masterfully sets us swinging and swaying by inserting the 2-3 accompaniment to the melody in such a way as to cause the swinging sensation even when it may fall on unexpected beats. In this way, he seems to have created an elegant dance space that he doesn't quite completely fit into, a space that he is expected to occupy in a certain way, but isn't quite allowed to be his complete, authentic self. You might notice the mood shifting to more tension if you don't listen carefully for the timpani striking all 5 beats in the pattern throughout the middle section and again toward the end of the movement. This, in effect, steals some of the swing from the dance and makes it just a fraction more foreboding. It also might be the reason I highlighted the similarities of Gustav Holst's Mars, also in 5/4 meter, in a mashup video I made and posted on the website. You'll enjoy that, even though I'll likely burn in classical music hell for making that mashup. A typical performance of the Passionate Symphony of Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony lasts about 45 minutes. So, just returning to this quote, art is the place where beauty and tragedy meet. I would also say this meeting of beauty and tragedy and the art expression that comes from it is where we can find a sort of truth and a way forward out of darkness. Thank you.